Hey there, and thanks for joining us today on Hay Talk with Massey Ferguson. I'm Matt LeCroy with Massey Ferguson and Heston by Massey Ferguson.
And I'm Jessica Williamson, Livestock and Forage Manager with AGCO. We're here to help you get the best hay possible. And this season on Hay Talk, we're diving even deeper, looking into how you can maximize your output, get the most from your equipment, and more.
Today we're talking everything dry down. We're looking at specific crop types and what that means for your hay dry down, swath width, plus a general look at conditioning. Then we'll take a look at the Twin Max Double Conditioner from Heston by Massey Ferguson, and Jessica will dive deeper into some interesting data from a recent project. Stay tuned after the break. And we're back from the break, and I have Jessica Williamson on here with me. We're going to talk about first crop types. We'll talk about different crop types, different conditioning methods, and different conditioning systems as well. So, Jessica, which crop type would you like to start with first?
Well, thanks for having me, Matt. It's good to be here today. I guess first we can talk about our favorite, alfalfa.
Yeah, alfalfa is fun for me. One thing we need to remember anytime we're doing alfalfa is we need to retain every one of those leaves because that's the most important part, obviously. So, first of all, let's look at what's the best time to cut, and also what's the best conditioning method that you know of, and what data do we have to back that up?
Sure. So I think it's important to remember that regardless of whatever crop species we're going to be talking about today, the upper two-thirds of that plant is going to be where the most nutritious portion of that plant is going to be. And so that's going to be the part that we're going to try to retain the most of. So that leafy portion, whether we're talking about legumes or grasses, that's going to be where most of those really valuable nutrients are going to be coming from. And so as we go through and talk about dry down and trying to retain those nutrients, really the name of the game is trying to preserve the nutrients that are already found within that crop throughout that entire process. And so whenever we go in and first start talking about alfalfa, so we really have two main types of conditioners. We have our roller type conditioner or our impeller or tine conditioner. And whenever we're talking about alfalfa, if we're taking that crop through a conditioner and it's hitting all of those tines, we're going to lose leaves. Some previous research has shown that there can be anywhere from a 2 to 4% leaf loss in alfalfa with a tine conditioner. So really the most ideal type of conditioner for alfalfa is going to be a roller conditioner, where we can get that crimping of the stem and help to optimize the dry down rate and get that crop dried down as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so just to add to that, there are multiple types of roller conditioners too, right? So you've got rubber on rubber, they have the wider lugs, and then you have a steel on steel type, which we normally prefer. Now, when you look at our self-propelled windrowers, for instance, we only offer the steel on steel.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into our pull type mower conditioners, we offer several different condition rolls, rubber on steel, rubber on rubber, as well as steel on steel, of course, and sometimes tine conditioners. Um, how do you feel about, one preferably over the other when you start getting into uh, alfalfa, for instance? And then we can look at the other grassy hays later.
Yeah. So, as far as I know, I really don't think that we have looked at a steel conditioner versus a rubber conditioner and how well that crop dries down, how well we maintain those nutrients. But really, whenever it comes to my thought process, I really think about longevity. And we know that those steel rolls are going to last much longer than the rubber rollers. If you think about it, the name of the game is getting a nice, even condition in your crop across the entire swath as it goes through. And so, year over year, if you're using a rubber conditioner, likely you're getting a lot of wear on those conditioner rolls right in the middle. And so, after a while, we're probably going to get less of that crimping effect there in the middle portion of the rolls versus on the outer portions. So as a result, we may get an uneven dry down of our swath, which is really inconvenient whenever we're trying to dry our hay down. We want our hay to dry down not only quickly, but we also want it to dry down evenly. We want to avoid those wet spots in our bales. That's where we get our mold growth. That's where we get a lot of our increase in temperature, the burning of our sugars. That's all a result of those wet spots in our hay bales. So we really just see increased longevity with steel conditioners. But even though we still see increased longevity, it's still preferred to use any type of roller conditioner over a tine conditioner whenever it comes to alfalfa, for sure.
So, in the discussion, there's 1,000 things going through my head right now. So, I just want to look at one of those things. So, still and still conditioning rolls. One reason we always prefer those on my side of the business is yes, they do last longer. They're less expensive to build. They're less expensive for a farmer that has to replace them. Because if you think about a rubber roller, it still has a steel roller in the middle of it, right? So it's molded in injection rubber. And if you step back a few years, when we had tie core rollers, they did last longer because they were bias ply tires that were sliced up. And not many people use bias ply tires like they used to, so they're not as common, not readily available. And the cost just became, kind of high for manufacturers to go that route. And then secondarily, you jump into it, you think about the rubber roller, and your lugs are going to be 3-4 inches wide, right? So they're overlapping each other. There's no break between them. When you're running up that stem of your alfalfa and you get to those leaves, it's going to continue to press down through there and could in turn damage your leaves and bruise them, which would of course reduce your value of your forage. But when you get to the still and still, it's going to crimp every 3 or 4 inches. So it makes a crimp every 3 or 4 inches as it's going through there. The good thing about that is when you get to those leaves, you miss a lot of those leaves, right? And, as we get further into this conversation, we'll look at our Twin Max double conditioner and how that works. And does it still play that key of a role when we get to alfalfa, right?
Yep, absolutely. And so you brought up a really, really good point about the bruising of leaves and how that's, the thing with hay and in our line of business is you're only going to get hay as good as what you start with. Right? You can never increase your forage quality above what it is standing in the field. So the whole goal is to maintain as much of that quality as possible. And so as it goes through a roller conditioner, just like you said, we have the possibility of those leaves becoming bruised. And with that, we could lose some of those really valuable nutrients that are found within that leaf throughout the dry down process. So, like you said, we'll talk a little bit about the double conditioner here in a minute. But really, the main key is to crimp that stem and not crush the stem, and to not crush the leaf.
Yep, very good point. Very good point. So let's stay on track here because you and I want to go on tangents sometimes and get really excited about. Hey, let's look at swath width. Mm-hmm. So one thing you have to keep in mind when we're going out and doing demos with farmers around North America, one thing we have to think about is we have to stay within their operation, right? We can, say that this is going to be your best possible hay quality and it's going to come off the ground faster and resulting in better, look and feel the crop as well. But we still have to stay within those boundaries, assuming all things being perfect and the farmer would be easily changed. They can change their width of their tractor, tread settings, that kind of stuff. What are you looking for a perfect swath width?
Sure. So ideally, we would want a swath width to be about 80% the width of that cutter bar. As we know, it's not always possible, especially in our self-propelled windrowers. We definitely do not want to run over that crop. That's going to cause more harm than good with a wide swath. So as you said, it's really important to make sure that we're matching our operation type and matching our machine type. But if we're using a pull type mower, it gives us a little bit more flexibility of laying a really wide, flat swath. Some research by Dr. Dan Understander has shown that just by maximizing that swath width to about 80% of that cutter bar width, we're able to dry down that crop significantly quicker. I believe in one of his studies, he had about a full day earlier that crop was able to be dried down and baled for hay versus a really narrow swath width. So really the important thing that we need to think about with maximizing our swath width and just improving our dry down regardless of how it is that we're managing our hay is we want to reduce the respiration that's happening in that crop as much and as quickly as possible. In a few weeks, whenever we talk about round bale silage, we'll talk about that even more and how important it is to reduce that aerobic respiration. But we're essentially doing the same thing as we lay down this swath. We want to lay it flat and wide and allow that crop to dry down because during respiration, it's essentially burning up those really valuable nutrients that we just talked about. Those carbohydrates are being burned up. So we want that to slow down as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's a good point to bring up respiration. Can you give our audience a short definition of what respiration is in case they don't know?
Sure. So our crops are going to photosynthesize, which is essentially taking the energy from the sun or taking the sunlight and creating energy. And then as they respire, they're actually going to be burning up that energy. And so they're taking those carbohydrates that are available and utilizing those and burning those up. And so after we cut that crop, that respiration process is going to commence and that crop is going to go into survival mode. It's going to try to save itself and it's going to try to burn up all of those carbohydrates that it has available for energy. And so our goal with making hay, our very first goal is going to be to reduce that respiration process as quickly as possible. Typically, we'll really see a slow in respiration almost to 0%, but not quite, right around that 20% moisture mark. So about 80% dry matter is where we really see a reduction in respiration.
Yeah, and that ties directly back into what I was mentioning earlier about getting the crop off the field faster. If you're conditioned properly and you're conditioned all that you can with the equipment you're working with, you're going to get the crop off the field faster, and it gives secondary meaning to regrowth time and that kind of thing as well. But you're going to have that better looking crop. You're going to have a more digestible crop and with more nutrients if you can get it off the field faster, which leads us into our next topic is talking about our Twin Max double conditioner. So I mentioned earlier that a normal still and still conditioner would go about every 3 or 4 inches and do a crimp for you. Then we jump into a double conditioner, which we call Twin Max. That is going to go every 2 to 3 inches. So you're crimping almost twice as many times. Still, you're going to be saving a lot of those leaves. You're going to hit, I guess, maybe a couple more leaves, but nothing like a rubber on rubber roller would. And Jessica, can you talk to us about some of the findings you've had? Because you've done a lot of research out in the field, day in, day out in the middle of the summertime with a double conditioner versus our single conditioner. So what information can you give us there?
Sure. So this past year, we were able to go in a pure stand of alfalfa and really look at the double conditioner and how we can really utilize this on an operation. So the overall goal of the trial was to go somewhere where we really didn't have ideal drying conditions so that we could see exactly how well this crop is going to dry or how much better the crop is going to dry with the double conditioner versus a single conditioner versus no conditioning at all. So we ended up in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. And we looked at, like I said, we were in a pure stand of alfalfa, so we really didn't have any confounding variables with grass production in the field. We had a very uniform stand in terms of yield. And we essentially, like I said, just looked at the different types of conditioning versus no conditioning at all. And what we found was the double conditioner, we got that crop dried down to 14% dry matter, 14% moisture at the 52-hour mark, We got that single conditioner dried down to 20% moisture at the 52-hour mark. And at the 52-hour mark, the no condition was still at 34% moisture. So we went ahead and baled up the double condition and the single condition crop. And we took some comparisons. We saw no difference in overall relative feed value, total digestible nutrients. So essentially, what we're saying is with the single conditioner versus double conditioner, we saw no reduction in overall forage quality. So that's telling us that we're getting that crop off of the field faster. So, by our calculations, even though we baled them at the same time, we technically could have baled that double conditioned crop 6 to 8 hours sooner. That's a lot of time savings. That's a lot of dollar savings, especially if you're trying to beat the rain, right? It's very, very important, very critical, especially in an alfalfa crop. And so, like I said, we saw no reduction in forage quality with single versus double conditioning. The following day, we went ahead and went out and tried to bale up, tried to collect the forage data in dry hay from our no conditioned crop. And it still was not dry. We were still at that 30% mark. We couldn't get that crop dried down before an incoming rain. So it was actually a real life situation for us. We got that conditioned crop off of the field in a timely manner before the impending rain. But the crop that we didn't condition at all, we ended up baling and wrapping that for silage. So we went ahead and pulled a forage sample from that. And again, we saw no reduction in forage quality with the conditioned crop, whether that be single or double conditioned versus the not conditioned crop. So in this particular instance, we saw that our single conditioner and our double conditioner still had the leaf retention that is our overall goal. And for our double conditioner, we got that crop off much, much sooner than with our single conditioner versus or the no conditioned at all.
Yeah, I mean, you were lucky you had a silage baler there and
Yes.
to bale it and wrap it and everything. Not everybody has that option, so maybe on the next episode or something we can dig deeper into that.
Absolutely.
Another thing to point out is where you were located. You're in Dodgeville, Wisconsin, so it's a very humid, very wet area. Of course, you had rain coming, so you had to move fast. And for our audience, take that into consideration where you're located. And if you're in a more arid place than around the Great Lakes region or the Northeast part of North America, then you're going to have even more dry down. So if you're getting 6 or 8 hours in Dodgeville, Wisconsin, you jump that to let's take Oklahoma, for instance, and you're going to be jump that at close to a day, right? You take that to Arizona, and it's going to be a day and a half or something. It could be. So interesting information that comes out of there. So circling back on different crop types, I know we've talked a lot about alfalfa, and everybody doesn't grow alfalfa, obviously. So when we're looking at a swath width or anything, does it matter at all if we jump into the grass haze, or is it going to pretty much stay around the same thought process there?
Yeah, same thought process, regardless of crop type. We're going to want to have as wide of a swath as possible. Like I said before, much easier with a pull type mower conditioner than it's going to be with a windrower. But same concept. The very nutritious portion of that crop is going to be in the leaf material. Those crops are still going to be respiring as well. And so the concept is going to be to reduce that respiration process as much as possible and conserve those available nutrients.
Yeah, and that takes you to another a whole nother discussion about making sure your subpropel windrower is set up properly and make sure you've got your your rear wheels set properly and your rear axle and everything, so you're not running crop over. I
Mm-hmm.
have wondered, and kind of getting into some studies with grass haze, if it's worth it to make the swath as wide as possible, potentially run over some of your crop because you don't have those delicate leaves like you do alfalfa, potentially run over some of that crop, but the majority of the crop doesn't get run over and it will dry down faster and hopefully give you a better result in the end. Have you ever done any research into that, see if it's okay to run some over for the sake of the mass?
Well, I haven't done any of that research yet, but we do have some research planned this upcoming year in Washington State, working with a customer and looking at different conditioner settings in. So they have Twin Max windrowers. We want to look at different conditioner settings in their grass hay. So we know what's going on in alfalfa. We know that we're going to have a benefit, but does it? So they grow a lot of Timothy. Does it help in their Timothy? To have different conditioner settings. I had not thought about swath width, but that can definitely be something that we add in.
Yeah, so that takes you to a whole other thing when you get into some specialty crops. When you get into some oats or you should get into sorghum or whatever it may be. There's a big range of items you can work with. So one thing to think about is make sure you always have your conditioners set properly for what crop you're in. So if you're in the oats, of course, you don't want to shell those out. So you want to open up as wide as possible and that kind of stuff so you're not damaging anything. And then when you get the sorghum, you make sure you don't macerate the crop and turn it into mush at the end, right? You make sure you're still, crimping it, getting some conditioning, but not going overzealous with it. So that, everything, regardless of what it is, you got to make sure you use it properly to get the best results, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that oftentimes that's something that our customers and farmers overlook. They'll pull their windrower out for the year. They'll pull their pull type mower out for the year, and they really don't take a look at those. Roller settings and those conditioner settings. And it's really important to think about that and think about what type of crop you're going in. So I really think that even in our stemmier crops, like a sorghum sedan, something like that, we can still see the benefit of that roller conditioner with crimping those stems. And even if we're making round bale silage where it's going to be a high moisture crop, it's still really important to get to that ideal moisture level as quickly as possible. So our conditioner can really help even in those warm season annuals.
Yeah, and regardless if you're using our pull type mower conditioners like a 1316S, like the 16 footer or something, 13 footer, or our self-propel windrowers, one thing we do is hydraulic tensioning. So you just mentioned to make sure your settings are proper. Is when since we use hydraulic tensioning, we know exactly what psi we've got that set at every year. Versus a spring tensioner, you don't know exactly what pressure you've got to set at. You can go out and measure it from year to year and make sure it's at 2 inches of spring or whatever it may be. But springs, of course, wear out over time and that kind of thing. So what we like to do with the our units that have the hydraulic tensioning, and that is on the condition rolls, obviously, is we like to start out a little bit heavier in that first cutting, and then when that second cutting comes in, it's a little more tender. We'll back that off a little bit, so we may be around anywhere from 800 to 900 psi in that first go round, first cutting. And then around second cutting, we'll back that off to 600, 800 psi to, of course, not damage the crop. Now, when you get into a grass hay, it's not as uh, important to change that setting. You want to change it a little bit, but it's not as important to back it off so much so you don't damage leaves and a tender crop. But we have very similar settings, regardless if you're going into a grassy hay, whether it be fescue, Bermuda, even Timothy, versus if you're going into alfalfa. We try to keep our condition rolls set, the proper width. We make sure your timing is right, and there's easy settings, and we have, if you go on YouTube, there's easy settings of how to change your roll gap, and also how to change your timing, because you may want to be a little, for your situation, you may want to have it a little ahead of itself, so it does a little bit extra conditioning. And so that's one thing to think about. But circling back to the Twin Max, make sure it's right for your operation. I suggest you go out and do a demo because it will dry down faster. And depending on your operation, you may not want your crop to dry down faster. Of course, we all want to beat rain and stuff, but I have seen a couple of scenarios where it dried down too fast. So if it's a one-person operation, they go around and do all their cutting, then they come through and do all their round baling, for instance. Sometimes it could dry down a little bit too fast, and you run into a bleaching, potential bleaching issue out in the field. And if you're trying to sell your crop, of course, you don't want that at all. So that's, one thing to think about.
Yep. Another thing that I want to point out with that trial that we did looking at the different conditioner types, we really did not see the single versus double conditioner pull apart from itself in terms of dry down until after that 24-hour mark. And so don't be discouraged if you start running a double conditioner and you're like, well, this might not be drying down faster after all. We really didn't see an improvement in dry down rate until after that 24 to 28-hour mark. So I did want to point that out as well.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So,
Mm-hmm.
right, Jessica, do you want to wrap us up for today's episode, and then we can join these nice people back around for the episode 2?
Absolutely. Be sure to join us next episode where we'll be chatting about round bale silage, getting into the nutrition side of things, moisture levels, and more.
Great. Thank you all for joining, and stick around for another episode coming up soon.